How are you guys?
I guess one of the philosophies I had with the auditor controller is you just buy good equipment for your employees because it's so frustrating if you get bad equipment.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree.
All right, are we ready to begin? Cool. I'll call this meeting to order, a meeting of the Finance Committee. I'll announce that this meeting is being recorded, and Jonathan, if you can do the roll call.
Yes, Director Brandt.
Here.
Director Bertrand.
Here.
Director Geis.
Here.
Perfect. Before we begin, we would like to acknowledge the Chumash people who are the traditional custodians of this land. We pay our respects to the Chumash elders, past, present, and future, who call this place Anaskoyo, the land that Isla Vista sits upon, their home. We are proud to continue their tradition of coming together and growing as a community. We thank the Chumash community for their stewardship and support, and we look forward to strengthening our ties as we continue our relationship of mutual respect and understanding. We'll now go into public comment. At this time, any member of the public may speak on matters within the subject matter jurisdiction of the Finance Committee that are not on the agenda. The committee will not take action on any item not on the agenda except as provided by law. I don't see any public members here, but we'll reopen this if anyone comes on. And now we'll go to 3.1, discussion on public safety budget.
Great. Would you all mind if we actually started with the 3.7, just the overview of the budget so far, just to help us look at the numbers?
That sounds great.
Great. I should have reordered that next time. So budget is moving along really well. So I wanted to show you all where we're at with revenue projections and some of the data the numbers we inputted from the last discussion. So we have more revenue figures, much more since our last meeting. I actually think we didn't even have March yet when we last met. So revenue figures continue to go up. Right now, the March or the current year estimated actual is 996,000, and the next year estimated actual is 990,000. And the reason that is a smaller number is because the estimated actuals continue to use we keep using the older numbers to be conservative. As the month, next time we meet, we should have another round of updated numbers, and I think we will end up with a good figure. We could hit the million mark next fiscal year. I mean, we could hit it this year actually. So we can discuss how we want to represent this in our budget. I think the more conservative, the better. And then in July and August, when we do the final budget, we can have additional funds that we can direct at that board meeting. So, wondering what your thoughts are before we get to the expenses.
Well, I think this looks great. This is great news, and I support the trajectory you're on using the conservative numbers.
Me too. I agree.
Well, going to spending now. So we have some updates. The first one is salaries and operations. I might move this actually to the 2002 communications. I don't know. It doesn't necessarily matter that much, but we included the community engagement director into our salaries now. So that now includes the 3 full-time positions in there. It includes the new costs of our staff pay and benefits ad hoc committee work. So that's all covered. And this 50,000 is actually inclusive of Ross's new prices as well. So as long as we don't go over, which we've actually not gone over in a fair amount of time, like 4 or 5 months now, maybe even more. I think we went over by $50 in April actually for the MSR we were working on. So We are doing much better on our legal expenses than in the past, but it makes sense because we had a lot of startup needs and we just have way less now. And a lot of our contracts are standardized. So that's the program 2000 changes. I added in some numbers for the community center and community room based on our discussion. So this is just we put the assistant general manager range at I think 70 to 80. So this is the middle of that. And then the other, salary info we have grant writing and programming as same 25. So, and then we didn't touch the rest like we discussed we wouldn't. So that puts the community center costs, without, if we were just plain tenants at 156,000 at status quo agreements. Special projects still, 3,000, 30,000, 3,000 on Survivor Center. The Compost Collective, here are some numbers of how this is going to look for next year. So 74,000 is the total cost with 40,000 in grant from AS. So around a $35,000 cost to the district. And we're gonna finalize this in the next few, as we keep getting more actuals, but this is about it. 74,000, maybe 75, maybe 73 for the Compost Collective. So that's the cost of the district, 30,000, 35,000. Festival stayed the same. Mediation program, Deborah is working on the annual report, and we have a board discussion for that coming up. So we'll save that for our June finance meeting. Public safety, I just put in here, since the board did say that we wanted to at least move forward with the current safety station arrangement, 57,000, but this can of course change based on the discussions with UCPD. And so we have a few months. That's why we put our budget out to August so that we can make these numbers finalized. Haven't added in anything for the investigator or talk about the rest of this today. And yeah, haven't put in the rest for the rest of the budget because that's what we're talking about today. But our expenditures so far are 827,000 that we have talked about allocating. And then going back to this other slide or this other tab, 990,000 plus 200,000 from UCSB plus 41,000 from the compost grant. It's called residual fund balance because we're getting the grants this year, putting them in our savings and then taking them out next year. And then the same with the safety stations. We have extra money left over that can help us do the expansion from the past, as we go into ongoing. So that's 1.2. What was I saying? 1.2 million. And then the expenses are about 800,000. So we have around 447 to still allocate. And it looks like a couple of the expenses didn't copy over, around 20,000. So 420,000 that we've still got to allocate over the next, this meeting, the next finance meeting, and into the board discussion. So that's where we're at now.
Thanks for that overview. That's really helpful. And just to confirm, so you mentioned the 447,000 that we have to allocate, and what reserves does that leave us with if we were to spend most of that down?
Well, so this is just the ongoing costs we haven't allocated yet. We could put in as much as we want. So if we put in like 152,000 for the interpersonal, since that's an ongoing, and Ivy Beautiful, we need to talk about what we want, where we want this to land. But I can tell you that the estimated actuals are higher than what we budgeted before because we had budgeted wrong. We budgeted too early, I guess, not wrong. So let's say it goes up to more like 85. The old number here was 50,000. They're all on the estimated actual sheet. And the parking, that's a whole other thing. I haven't put in STEP yet since that's revenue neutral technically. So if we allocate those things and we don't allocate the parking study yet, because that's a discussion I think we still need to have. And this is nothing on community planning. we still have 160,000 ongoing to allocate next fiscal year. So some of that could be towards reserve and some of it might not be.
Got it. Thanks.
Yeah.
Spencer, Bob, do you guys have any other questions on this part before we start going through the items we're considering tonight?
Nope, not at this time.
No, me neither.
Cool. So Jonathan, wherever you want to take us next.
Okay, well, let's do public safety next. We have a board discussion coming up tomorrow on the investigator, and we have talked about the safety stations already. I think we already talked about eliminating this one, so but we can talk about that too. And then we can talk about how we want to fit in the alternative policing model that we've discussed, and hopefully we'll have back on June 8th. We're working on getting that scheduled to be then. So yeah, we want to hear on how we want to maybe move forward. What ranges are we comfortable with in the safety stations to expand into? Where are we thinking the cost for the SNAP, or if that's what the board wants to do, but if we want to budget for alternative policing, what kind of budget we want to give that? And also, we need to talk a little bit about revenue. We need to just be aware that these programs are funded with the UCSB grant, and that is coming due. It's not, there's a couple years left in it, but not that many years left, 2 fiscal years, if I'm correct. Yes, 2023. So, no, 2023, 24. So 3 fiscal years left of that. So that's not that long from now. So while these are currently funded through that grant, and we can start talking about how these fit into our budget with or without that. But that's maybe less of a discussion than where we want to go with these in the next year. But it's something to keep in mind.
So my first thought on public safety is yes, we still have to hear from the interpersonal violence investigator tomorrow. I have a feeling that our board will continue to support that as an ongoing program, given what continues to be done by the investigator and the progress they're making. But we'll see ultimately where the board goes on that. However, with the safety stations, we really heard strong support for expanding the program, including by opening additional locations throughout the community. And obviously in the discussion, there were points made about how, well, if we were to expand to other locations, it doesn't necessarily mean that we have to totally increase staffing, because it could be a reallocation of how the stations are staffed. But either way, have you had any discussions with UCPD yet since our last meeting?
No, we haven't. They've been focusing on this next presentation. So we're going to talk. I told them let's talk either starting this Friday or soon after.
Yeah. So I would anticipate that if we get what we want as far as expanding the program, there will be some additional costs. We don't know how much that would be right now, but if it would be helpful for just our working process, I don't know if we want to preliminarily increase the budget by a quarter or something like that.
Yeah, we can do something like that. I think that's also just now up to us. Is like, yeah, do we want to increase this by a quarter, a third, what we think it'll be? If we did a quarter, it'll be the budget will be, getting the number, 71,000. That's what increase by a quarter would be.
Yeah, and I mean, it would just be a placeholder until you finish your discussions, but I think that would be accurate, an accurate reflection of kind of what our board discussion was.
Yeah.
Spencer, Bob, what do you guys think about that?
I agree. As long as it's clear that it's a placeholder, we don't know what the actual number will be yet. And I actually had a question. So you gave a figure, Jonathan, about the amount of money that we have yet to allocate in the budget. And does that amount, seeing now in detail that there's a 0 next to interpersonal violence investigator, is that under the expectation that the interpersonal violence investigator would come from that unallocated money?
Yeah, I guess technically, yeah, it would come out of the 200,000 of UCSB. That's part of the available money still.
Got it. Okay. Well, then my recommendation on that for now, since we are just talking in placeholders, since we haven't heard the presentation yet, there is, let's just put the money in there as a placeholder so that for our budgeting purposes, I think it's helpful.
Yeah. So then that puts our new number here at 280.
Yeah, and as far as number 5003, the social media intern, I think your comments before were correct. I know eliminate is a harsh word, but reallocate. As we've discussed, there are other public safety priorities we have, and any funding that we would be putting into this could be better used in our alternative response program that we're talking about.
Yeah. Should we rename 503 alternative response? Or should we wait on until
so here's how my suggestion on how to approach it is. I think we should allocate an additional amount to program development, and that money can be drawn upon if there is something that we can contribute to that is specific or a program that we develop.
Okay.
And then I would just eliminate that line item entirely to make it clear that that's not in the cards.
Okay, so let's get rid of this. All right, do we want to create a new program develop? This is more of a technical. Do we want to put it as a public safety new program or as a community programs new program? It almost doesn't matter, but it could then like how we want to message what the money is for in the budget.
Personally, I like the idea of having all the money within program development and not siloing things off. I think it's just helpful for the board and the public to understand.
Okay.
Agreed.
So how much are we thinking? Or do we want to not put a number yet?
Well, let's not put a number yet because I also see there's no allocation there rolled over from what we had last year.
Right. Yeah, we didn't have anything this year. Okay. We good with public safety then?
Good for
yeah, I mean, well, I guess personally, I'm looking at this item as one that could even the spending on the safety station could grow in excess of what we have now. We will see what is in the cards.
Cool. Great. All right, we ready for the next one?
Yep.
All right. So, Isla Vista Beautiful is our next one, and all right, let me pull up where it is at here, and then I'm also pulling.
Jonathan, sorry to cut you off. Mark Vukovic has had his hand up. I missed that.
My mistake. Go ahead.
Mark, go ahead.
I'll totally admit that I forgot what I was going to ask about. It was actually it was a little bit ago. I was just hoping if it could be clarified because I'm just not as aware as y'all about the UCSB grant, and that's like has a finite time capacity. Is there an ability to, or is there a potential for getting that grant again? Like, if that could be elaborated, I would just be interested in that.
Yeah, so the university pledged $200,000 per year to be renegotiated after the first 7 years. I think the spirit of it was that at that time, there would be an agreement on how to continue the partnership. I don't think it was implied that it would just be for the first 7 years, but it's something that we still will need to go to the university and ask what their continued partnership will be. And that's not a discussion we've had yet.
Got it. Thank you.
Is that your understanding, Jonathan?
Yeah. Okay, so we can go to the Ivy Beautiful. Okay, so Ivy Beautiful, this program, we have also had a discussion at the board already on it, and we did have a good reception there, and there was a willingness from the board to invest in expansion, especially it sounded like in the areas of marketing and advertisement. So, we'll do that. How we do that, with the new community engagement director, it'll be better and different, how we budget for that. But really, it's how this program's operating. How do we want to invest in this program in terms of what it does? Excuse me. So far, it's been starting to land. They didn't spend the whole regular program budget at the beginning of the year. They were underspending, and now they've ramped up the spending to make up for it, so that they can spend the whole 81,000 that our grant ended up being for. So when you see the bills, they do look like, oh, why are these higher? It's because some of the earlier bills, they were lower. So that's still considered. Me looking at things, and I still, we're gonna meet with them too and see how we're gonna do the costing for this program next year. I still see it as being around an $85,000 cost at the current level of operations, like they're operating since January, December, February, March, April, to be making up for those past weeks. I mean, that just seems like also the base operating, to be honest, to what they're able to get done and accomplish. So I'm still going to meet with them to see where they're at, but it looks like it's going to end up being at 85,000 at status quo plus. And the power washing is definitely a cost that's going to be incurred, but I don't think it's going to be much of a staff cost. I mean, that's something I guess the board will need to discuss in July when we get the report from them and how, what they're going to be able to make work. But I can tell you that they're really thinking about power washing in the context, at least for this first year, of on a need basis. So if someone's, this is something that actually happened. Someone spilled molasses, like a huge container on the public street, and they had to clean that. So they're thinking that's where things are going. I can say they're going to come to the board and make their presentation, but they're going towards power washing as needed. So I don't know how much staff expansion that will actually need to execute. But again, we might be wanting to have more staff, more job opportunities. Right now it's the 3, but they're getting the extra hours from the 2 positions who aren't hired. That those 20 hours are split amongst the 3 that are there to utilize. And we have a halftime coordinator who gets paid actually the same as the workers. So that's another thing to think about. And we have, then they created like a lead position who then got paid $1 extra to be the team leader. So those are some of the things that have happened and has been going on. So want to see where you all are at, especially so that I could work with them more effectively to come up with the next contract, because they did reach out to start having that discussion. So want to see where you all, I did invite them to be here if they could, but I don't think they could make it today. But maybe the June one, they can come for a more in-depth look on things, because this is more complex. But yeah, that's a little overview of where things are here.
Yeah, so my thought, Jonathan, is on hearing the consideration of like how the program coordinator is paid. Definitely want to right size that if there's some increase that is due there, just because this is a really important program, and I'm sure it's a challenging assignment. So we want to make sure that we're able to keep someone good in that position. And then definitely hear what you're saying about the power washing. Let's see what they propose when they come to our board. I'm always interested in how we can add a couple people to the team. Do you have any update on if they've grown their staff at all?
The staff's still 3 people.
Okay.
It's still, yeah, same 3 people we've had for a year and a half now.
Got it. My thought is, I mean, especially given the increase in homelessness in Isla Vista, if we can add a couple more people, I think that would be a great community service, but also recognize their limitations.
Yeah, I get one question is, they seem to really be liking the 3 people getting the amount of hours they get, which is I guess like 15 to 17. And maybe that's what is gonna get people to do the job longer term and do a good job. So do you all think like should we have the jobs be 15 hours or 10 hours? I mean, it could also be reconfigured. Some people can have more than others, but it's budgeted at like the 5 to 10, having 5 people for 10 hours, so 50 hours of labor. I guess we can think of it in an hours kind of consideration too, like how many available hours there are. If we got to like 4 or 5 people, do we want to have 70 to 80 hours then available kind of thing too, or keep the number of hours the same?
I'd go for an increase in the hours, just because I know it's important for there still to be enough hours for people to make the wages that they need. Spencer?
Jonathan, are they using all of the hours right now? Like what's the hourly count?
They definitely are using all the hours. I don't have an hourly breakdown, which I can get though. But I know that the hourly breakdown, here's how I'll say it. From the beginning of the contract to the end, we're projected to actually spend 44,000 rather than 41,000. I mean, that's actually projections. The actuals they promise will come in at the contract amount, but to keep the current level of service where they upped hours to make up for less hours that were utilized in the fall, maybe due to COVID and other issues, it would end up at 44. So they are using all of them. They're maxing out the hours.
Great. Well, having looked at the survey that we're looking at later on the agenda, it's very clear that this is, I think, one of the top priorities for the community. And I think that we should increase the hours significantly. And I would say if we're at 50 right now, maybe we take it up to 75.
Okay. Okay, I can work on numbers and all that and work with them to figure out how that'll cost. But this is good direction. So about, I guess, what is that? 50% more hours. Hopefully they can hire another opportunity, another person or two, and we'll see what they say on the pressure washer. So that's a discussion for later. And then the coordinator getting their wages right size.
Yeah, and I had a question on that too. So is the coordinator AmeriCorps Vista?
It's Christina.
Okay, so that her position is a Vista position.
No. It's a job.
No.
It's an employed job. The Vista, we actually don't pay for the Vista position. It's it's a federal. They got federal funding to do the Vistas, and they allocate. So the Vista is not dedicated to us like it used to be. So last year, like the year that ended in August of last year for them, that Vista assignment was ours because we paid for it. But this time we paid for the coordinator instead. And then the Vista was like the support. So the coordinator, like Christina, does all the day-to-day assignments, checking in, supervision, team meetings, and the Vista is doing, part of her time only, not because it's not ours, but doing the marketing and reports and all that stuff.
Got it. Makes sense.
Yeah.
Cool.
Okay.
Anything else on this item for now? All right. Public art. Or, I'm sorry, infrastructure.
So yeah, this one is one where we've always put in 50,000 as our commitment of what we would want to spend if we could. Like was mentioned, lighting does come up in our community survey a fair amount, and it is in our board goals still as well. So we did put into our LAFCO MSR that we'd like to look into CSA 31 being consolidated. So it is an area where we've been interested in, but we really haven't made the expenditures. And we have been able to get the county to make expenditures out of the taxes that IV residents already pay for lighting in CSA 31. So we were successful in that. But and we've talked about ideas in the past of different kinds of lighting, not street lighting, that we can invest in. So we've always put in the 50,000 as if we could spend, we would spend this much. But yeah, we can. That's the context in the background. I can't provide much more since not much more has happened.
I think that if we wanted to do the 50,000 again, that would be okay. But I also wonder if maybe we take funding that would usually be there and put it into program development to just have maximum flexibility, because we don't have a identified project right now. I agree that lighting would be kind of the lower hanging fruit for doing something. But I don't know if we have a project that will be identified in this fiscal year.
Yeah, I'm not sure exactly which direction to go with this, because I hear you, Ethan. And I know that we put that allocation there specifically for doing some sort of downlighting or some sort of standalone lighting that's not your traditional street lights, since we don't have control over the traditional street lights. So I could see a project presenting itself. I know that the park district has spoken in their meetings recently about lighting in the parks. But I could see that allocation making most sense in program development as well, since we haven't identified a project yet.
I would think that we should probably take a look at service area 31 and see what the effect was of the county putting in the 31 new lights, and what it's doing to the service area 31 budget at the county, and see if they're still accumulating surplus, and continue that project we have with them to keep improving the lighting, with us being the boots on the ground. We're the people out there looking at it and saying, hey, here's the vulnerable areas, and let's go keep working with the county to improve lighting if they can afford it. I still like the down the downlighting idea, but I just don't know how we pull that off without more good community planning and neighborhood planning, and the other 100-pound gorilla of how do we get a community plan and get it implemented. I mean, to me, lighting's part of that community plan, no different than undergrounding, the electrical lines and all that other kind of stuff. So I think we did a good job to get the 31 lights we did, and we used our 50,000 as a match, but obviously the match wasn't needed. The county could afford that.
And I'll share on the downlighting. One of the things that's tricky is most of the potential sites for downlighting would be on private property. And as we know from the tree discussion, it's hard for us to give money to private property owners. And I had kind of envisioned something almost like the rebate program that the Goleta Water District did for encouraging homeowners to take out their lawns and replace it with drought tolerant landscape. But it's tricky because we don't rebate people money because they don't pay us directly for services provided. So it's a tricky one. But I agree. Let's go back and look at the financial statements and see if there's been any change before we make any decision one way or another.
Yes, Spence, I would, that same thought applied to me when we were, thought came to me when we were talking about the street lighting. Oh, how could we do down lighting? But then I think back to the county redevelopment agency, and we had a program where we partnered with the private sector and we did all the facade improvements and stuff. So I don't know how legally we were able to do that in a partnership, and we as a district couldn't do that for downlighting. So I don't know. I think if maybe as a partnership thing, maybe we could do more stuff like that. As opposed, I think we were talking about the street trees. We were just doing, well, I don't know what, I'm not quite sure how we were doing those street trees. So, I mean, it was just a good idea, but.
Yeah, we wouldn't have been the ones that were giving the trees. The same way in this case, we'd be giving away funding. So
Yeah,
that, I think that's the tricky part. But I will say, I think there's, potential for us to look at the facilities that we do participate in with the community center and the community resource building, see if there are strategic ways that we could help implement lighting. Of course, we know both those buildings are under negotiation. We don't know the future of them. So we'll kind of have to sit tight, I think, on that front.
Well, we got the CDBG grant for the lighting there, and we put up the match for that to lighting and outside improvements and signage for those areas. So we'll get that done next year.
Well, so then I'm glad you brought that up, Jonathan. So where is that match reflected in the budget?
It's not in the budget. It's going to come out of the accumulated capital reserve. So I guess we will put it in the budget, but it's not really a budget expenditure from our tax. It's from here. How we do that accounting wise, I will ask Bob soon.
Well, in the budget, if you plan to spend that money this year, we should appropriate the budget and the financial sources of release of the reserve.
Right. So I think we're going to need to try to do that before the end of this fiscal year. So it's on my list of things to ask you about, Bob, soon.
I mean, we can do it inside the budget or we can do it outside the budget. Just requires probably more votes outside the budget. But I don't see that as a major worry amongst how we do budgeting, that we can't get consensus from. I think we always want consensus from all our board members, and we want, super majority votes when we get a good idea. We don't want to be putting in things that, need a 3/5 vote in the budget and a 4/5 vote outside the budget. So.
Right.
I'm not worried about us convincing our colleagues of the necessity of it, but I am worried about that we have our reserve policy that waterfalls money.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so if we've made a commitment with the grant for the match, and if we do allocate that in this year's budget, then we will have to then waterfall in from fund balance into the rest of the reserves. And then that changes, that's going to change how we think about approaching the budget, because that 280,000 number that Jonathan was showing us earlier is going to go down.
We have like 760,000 surplus in our reserves. So we won't waterfall anything. It'll refill itself.
Okay, never mind then. Okay. So the 280,000 was just unallocated ongoing.
Operating.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah, we only deal with that. Yeah. Yeah.
Well,
I think one of the things we
regardless-
got to, one of the things we got to think about though, as we begin to allocate money towards existing programs and grow those programs, then in the long term, the squeeze happens to us that you don't have any new money to allocate and we haven't started all the programs. And then it becomes a discussion of, oh, which ones are we going to cut, to provide other funding. So it's kind of a tricky thing once you get into the cut mode, and it's just something for us to think about on the long term about how we allocate our ongoing money. Because it'd be really difficult. Let's say the university doesn't give us their money anymore, and we're funding this, the the investigator, and you say, oh, okay, we're now going to cut the investigator, and we're all going, no, we all really like that program, but is the university ever going to try and lay that program off on us and say, well, start spending your tax increment on an investigator that's dedicated to Isla Vista? So I don't know.
So with that said, I would like to see that money reflected in the budget. I think it'll just make the discussion process easier. The matching money, and those are all good points, Bob. I'm thinking about it too, which is why I'm asking about it.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, well, I think we'll end up taking the 50 out of this year's budget. I think. If I don't know, we need to get in touch with them to see how they'd like it and all that. So
I think that makes sense. We did approve the agreement during this year, so it makes sense to come out of this year's budget.
Right.
Cool. Are we ready for public art?
Not a lot of background on this one. We've had a couple requests over the years, but the way we've kind of approached this is it's a fund available for requests that we can work with community groups to help fund those projects. And we get ideas, but we haven't had a lot of follow through on the ideas. So, and it hasn't been something we have championed ourselves to do. So we put in the the 3,000 or 5,000 a year. Let me get the exact number. 5,000 as like a available, but.
So I do want to see us do something here just because we have included it in our budgets for a few years. And I would like to see us maybe put out an RFP early in this next fiscal year to talk about some things that we're looking for. At the same time, I know that the new leadership at the Park District is taking a new interest in their mural program. So it may be that they're really active in that space, and that could change the nature of what we were trying to accomplish with this public art fund, because I think we were thinking murals too, as part of a more preventative approach to graffiti abatement. So I think it'll involve a conversation with the Park District, but if there is a way that we still have a stake in this, I would like to see us do something, even if it's just one project, that we send out a request for proposals and identify something that'll be meaningful for the community.
I would agree with that, Ethan. I think that's a good idea. We should keep the idea alive, even if we apply this public art budget to, the buildings, if we're successful in getting them, transferred from the county.
Totally. So Jonathan, did you say we had like 5,000 for that one?
Yeah.
5?
Yeah.
Got it. So I would put that there.
Okay.
I would agree.
Agreed.
I see we have Ash Valenci, IVRPD director on the line. I wonder, Ash, do you have any comments on public art?
Well, I public art is great. And yeah, I guess your idea of maybe we should like try working together because there is a mural plan for Little Acorn Park, and Kimberly had an idea of kind of expanding it. I don't think we've discussed this at a public meeting yet, but Kimberly has this idea of doing like a lot of murals at Little Acorn. Yeah, and you have your public art budget, so maybe we should like try to work together on it. Yeah.
Yeah, good to hear. And follow-up question real quick. Is the Park District's mural program focused on murals in parks or also murals outside of parks?
I'm pretty sure just parks.
Okay, got it. Then we would still have a lane in this, and I think our efforts could go hand in hand together. Thanks for that info.
Yeah.
Cool. Anything else on public art? Okay. Next up, parking.
I'm muted. All right, so we have, let's see. So we have some issues here with our formulas. I think I deleted something that shouldn't have been deleted. Give me one quick second. I know what it was. That was my fault. There we go. All right, and let me put in the new numbers we had. So we're at, before we get to parking, we're at 180,000 operating for next year. So, all right, so parking. We have, we've had the budget for the parking study in the past as an aspirational goal to get to. And then we, at some point, maybe 2019, started putting in the idea of, could we have some money to promote parking alternatives? And I think then that was the year where we had to put in the budget, and then COVID happened middle of that fiscal year. So we didn't do anything with that. And then we're gonna have the STEP grant, which I'm still working on piecing together. How do we put that into the budget in the right way? But it is revenue neutral for the most part. In fact, it helps pay for other things like the community engagement director, about like 9,000 to fund that position. So I'm not going to be worried about putting that in right now, especially for our discussion today, so I can have a little more time to make that fit right. But the one thing I wanted to bring up, which I did bring up at the board meeting, is we've had the parking study money in there. We had 25,000 in the past. I don't think we need to put 25,000 in again since we're doing the STEP grant. But what I was thinking is that we do need to put in some amount, because the STEP grant is not parking focused, even though it will have to take into consideration parking as part of sustainable transportation planning. But I think we have maybe more to know about parking than what we might have available in STEP grant funding to do among the other things the STEP grant is supposed to do. So one idea I have is that we should put in some amount, maybe like 10,000 here as a boost to the STEP grant contract with any, whoever we find as our transportation consultant, so that they can do additional work on the parking study to make sure that study is is maybe going to be disputable forever, but less disputable than the past parking studies, which have not been as qualitative and taking into account the whole picture of parking. So that's my idea of where we can go with parking in addition to the STEP grant, since we're doing so much with that. But we might need to supplement some of that work, and we might not, but I think it's good to have that as a possibility and to work with a consultant.
Hey, Jonathan, I thought at the last board meeting, you were thinking more like 50,000.
50,000. I mean, the thing is we're going to have the STEP grant already going, and they're going to be doing a lot of work. So I don't know if we need 50,000 to augment this. I mean, it could come back that that's what would be needed, but I think, and we've put in 25 in the past, and that might have been just an off number the entire time.
Okay, right.
But I mean, yeah, we just put that in. I don't know at this point where that number came from. We put it in since the beginning. But yeah, we were gonna have the STEP grant doing like 50 to 60,000 of the needs assessment work. So the idea is that it would bolster that needs assessment by, and the existing conditions report by saying, here's an additional existing conditions of parking. And we could do that. I mean, again, if we're already in contract, it could be not cheaper, but it'll, synergize with the other work. But if you think it might need more, I could be wrong. I did not research the prices to come up with the number 10,000. It was just half.
I just look at that.
If we haven't researched any prices yet, is let's just keep the same number that we've had. Because I agree with you, this is an excellent opportunity where we can have these two processes converge. But I also wouldn't want to hamstring and assume that it'll be less just because of the scale.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah, I agree with all of that. My concern going into this one was just making sure that we have the capacity to work on both projects in this year, because I know the STEP grant is really a huge priority, but it sounds like some extra money for parking will be helpful for complementing that study.
Yes, and yeah, I want to work, if this is what we decide, and then we do our RFP for the STEP grant, and we can do the RFP with the parking study as alongside it as a supplement, we can see what we get back, and it could be totally wrong, and we can rediscuss how we do this parking study. I think it will warrant a board discussion soon to say, well, if it is too expensive, do we want to do it over 2 years? Then could we just still use the same consultant and they at least are familiar? So we can put in the 25,000, but it's definitely something, if we're doing this, I think it's time to do it at the same time and have a good STEP grant and good parking study outcome, because we only get one shot at it, really, to do these. Okay. All right. Okay, well, I don't know if we need to discuss the STEP grant numbers yet, since I don't have that available for you all, but it'll be revenue neutral or beneficial for us. Parking alternatives, are you all still interested in this? Or I think a lot of this work will actually be done in the STEP grant, actually. Promotion of other ways to transport yourself besides a car. So we might not need this.
Yeah, maybe for now we just rely on the STEP grant and we can revisit that in the future if needed.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think just in my read of looking at what in the STEP grant budget, we'll probably have money in this box, but it'll be from the STEP grant.
Yeah. Cool. Well, and parking, that's parking. So we just have planning, which we put in 38,000 last year, thinking for this year, and we have made progress, but we haven't had progress to need to spend money yet. The interns are working on helping, get the research done preliminary on planning firms like the board directed, and I'm hoping to take their research and be able to get some ideas before the board, hopefully in June, it looks like, but we don't know any pricing or ranges here, so this is a more difficult one to do. So I guess would like to see what you all are thinking of going here.
My thinking is, as with the other ones, let's go status quo here until we hear that report, because I think that this could potentially be a really good project that we could accomplish this year that won't need too much oversight if it is as how I've conceived of it, which is
sort of research and educational in nature and less process related.
Right. Right.
Agreed.
Okay, so that was 33 and 35. I guess the 3,000 in advertising was to make sure that the public was there when we did do whatever we were doing, and if we're sticking with the education component, that would still make sense to me. So we're putting both in 35 and 33, or 35 and 3. Okay. So working budget, we're down to 117,000 not allocated to ongoing expenses. That's usually what we do. We do the 100,000 into reserves most years. So, but now what few things we haven't allocated are the mediation programs cost, which are not very high, but they haven't been allocated, and the new program development cost. And depending on what happens, we don't know what's going on with the community center yet, how that's going to impact our budget. But there would be potentially revenue attached to that too. So not to cover it though. So yeah, program development, we're not agendized to necessarily discuss program development, I guess today, or mediation, but those are, at least mediations for sure on our next meeting to discuss.
Got it. Shall we go through the high-level overview of the budget priority survey responses?
Yes, let's do it.
Hey, John. Hey, guys, I just have one question. In our current response to LAFCO on our municipal services review, is there anything in there that we haven't put any funding towards? Like, is there something where we haven't allocated any budget at all for something that's within our powers?
Well, to be honest, I don't even think the MSR asked about the prices of programs. It just asked about the activities.
Just remember before, when Paul Hood was there, their main thing that they were going to go look at is our allocations in the budget of whether we were performing our duties, which is a kind of an old style way of looking, are you accomplishing your objectives by allocating resources to those objectives? And I just wondered if there was something that we haven't allocated any resources to. I can't think of what they would be, but
I guess technically we don't spend money on a municipal advisory council.
Oh yeah, and the area planning commission where we got some money coming. Yeah, okay.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, you could see that the community plan work that we're doing on learning and education, that's informing us to, even if that's, we need to be more informed if we want to make that spend. So, that's pre-work there. And then, the infrastructure, if it doesn't have an allocation, it's had one in the past, and we have done stuff here, but that is another, this one is an entire power in the AB, in the government code, the 7002.
So what are we budgeting for the infrastructure or for the buildings next year?
Well, for public infrastructure, I heard we were going to put 0 and then put that money into program development as a more general. Yeah. And for the buildings, we're not there yet to have that discussion. We left that on 0 until the lease negotiation is resolved.
Okay.
Yeah. Cool. Well, I wanted to go outreach. So we have two things today for outreach, and a lot of it is, if we haven't yet, we can take time to also read through this on our own times. I've read through a lot of it already, but there's two things. One is, this is the raw data responses, obviously with the names and contact information removed. So if you want to, go look at what every single person responded, and look at the ideas and nuggets in here, there's obviously always a lot of good ones, and we actually did get to 100 responses on the survey. So it's a little short of our goal of 150, but it's a lot better than last year, especially when we did this during the pandemic. So I think it is a good improvement from the year before. And yes, Mark, these are available to the public because they're attached to the agenda for this meeting. So then the interns took those, looked at those, did some data analysis at the words that come up frequently, and we made this report. So I'm gonna go over some of this, but it'd be good to we're gonna make a final version of it for the budget, to attach to the budget. So, and if you all see anything that stands out at you in the responses that you think should be covered better in the report, we can also make improvements to this report and changes. So this is and they submitted it today to me. So I haven't fully read every single word closely in here, but I've read most of the entire thing, and it's looking good. So here's our responses of who responded to this. We had a pretty good mix. We could do a look at over the years how this looks, but we didn't do that. But it seems like a pretty good mix of the different populations in Isla Vista. We then, okay, how would you describe yourself? Majority is a UCSB student, 77% of the respondents. That's pretty normal for the survey. The ways quality of life can be improved in IV. So housing was our top issue that people submitted. The second one was community events. So that's something we at least are working on actively as a district. Then is parking. So good thing we just had that discussion. Street cleaning, and then lighting would be the tops. Homeless services is pretty close, and so is less policing to the top.
Hey,
So
Jonathan,
yeah.
can I pause on this? I have a request on this one, and specifically in terms of displaying that great information. Can we make it into a bar graph so that we can more closely see the different levels of interest that people have? I think that'd be a better way to display it, because that in particular, I guess when I was reviewing materials earlier today, I didn't notice this report was in here. So I just went through and started tallying things off myself because I was curious. And there's so much good feedback in there.
Yeah, sounds good. That's a good call. That's the kind of, we'll get that to the interns to get, they have the data, so it should be easy to repurpose. So yeah, that's where the issues were: housing, parking, lighting, community events, street cleaning. So we had discussions on almost all those things today. And then we had the other general questions. So these two questions are I don't want to call them the main questions, but they are the open-ended, like, let people speak their minds on the two issues: how do we improve quality of life, and how do we make Isla Vista safer, which is in our mission. So that's why we have these questions. So the top way to improve safety is lighting, according to the community survey. And there are a huge number of different individual ideas that are specific improvements. And then our interns ended up putting in foot patrol improvements into this more general category and did note that the improvements are generally about not having as much traditional law enforcement and having alternative response. But we named it foot patrol improvements because it did encapsulate more than just that, but that is the overwhelming, within that area. So please go through the answers, and it does become pretty obvious. But yeah, so having the alternative responses was the gist, not the traditional law enforcement armed officer response was what they meant by this. And then the other one that rose up higher than others was the improved homeless situation. So, if you think related to that, and then sexual assault at 7%. Everything else was in like the smaller percentage range. So that's safety. How can we make Isla Vista safer? So lighting is the biggest suggestion, and then changes to armed response. Transportation services. This is interesting. A lot of people say that they do have sufficient access. Many people did not answer the question. Some small amount said no. But there is some interesting discussion. I mean, a lot that we know, parking at night and the lack of safety that's related to that. This is I guess the bar graph version of it, and I think it is pretty good now that I see this one and like think of what we want to do with the other one. So this is how they did the data of the kinds of improvements to transportation. So parking, more bus stops, bike lanes, and then more frequent buses was actually less, interestingly enough. Grocery store, transportation to the grocery store, and trips to downtown Santa Barbara. So that's where people need to go to get their groceries. It's a food related issue. Transportation, healthcare, downtown, train station. Community events, what kind we'd like to see more of. So this was good because it synergized well with the nightlife project that's also ongoing. Concerts, far and away the number one idea that people submitted. And these were not pre-selected by us. It was an open-ended question. So people submitted all these ideas themselves of what they'd want. So it's really good information for us to be using in the future of planning events. But concerts is the big one. And so one of our interns is actually working on making now, she's spending a little bit of time of making a list. What are all the local artists that we can use now in the future? So it is, but it's a huge variety, very cool ideas in here. Please look through it. And some we've heard, some we haven't. Infrastructure improvements, lighting, again, number one, sidewalks, and then bike lanes. I actually don't think bike lanes have been featured this high in the past as an improvement from my memory. And then public arts and murals is number 4. And there's a good amount of discussion here on the specific areas where lighting is needed. Like we know a lot of this already. We do our regular surveys. And community gardens, there was a good amount of interest in community gardens. We're hearing the report on that tomorrow at our board meeting. Housing disputes, there's, actually surprisingly 40% did not have a housing dispute, but 40% did. And the issues around housing, overpriced and inaccessible, affordable. Very few people said that it was affordable, but most people say it's overpriced and inaccessible. Anything else to add? We didn't have many people. We had comments on police funding, comments on how to reform our utility user tax. Some we've actually heard before, these suggestions. Housing, free and accessible drug tests, and food bank. And then these are the more IVCSD specific questions. So how people have interacted with us. It's actually our meetings and having a personal connection. social media, attending classes. Not sure what I guess they meant the Zumba classes by that. Our safety stations, it's pretty good. From the people who responded, the majority have heard of them or you have used them actually. So that's good. That number has changed, that proportion. There's still not a lot of awareness about the resources we provide survivors. These resources are also mainly used, as a referral from resources like CARE and STESA, but definitely shows that we can do better here to make sure this is more visible. Mediation services, they are better known than I assumed they would be, but still not as well known, and that is always an area we need to improve too. But again, there is a market out there. There is a user base out there who needed this. People who've attended, there's a lot of people who haven't. It's also been a long time since we've had events in there. I think we haven't had events in there since the summer of 2019 now, because we were doing renovations of the community room all of fall of 2019 because of the mold issue. That reopened for just a couple months and then COVID started. So it's been almost 2 years since regular operations. So I'm actually surprised that 19% have attended events. People have obviously a lot of ideas for events, thankfully. Not a lot of people have the app, and we did not get a lot of not a lot of responses. We asked, what should we add? As if we haven't heard of it, it is a thing, and what could we add? More trash was the answer. So we do focus a lot on trash still. So again, we have around 20% and who've heard of it and 80 who haven't. So another area to keep growing, but we have things in motion right now to make this happen. So that is the presentation. And yep, like I said, please go through the questions, see if there's anything that stands out that maybe wasn't captured in the report, but I did ask them to really go in and highlight the best ideas that they saw in there. So it should be as comprehensive as possible, but there's a lot of great ideas in here that people submitted. So I'm really happy with the result, how many we got. That's it.
I see we have a hand raised from Mark. Mark, go ahead.
Thank you, Ethan. I, just as a public commenter, want to just really applaud this, because I think Jonathan just did such a great job on this. I think especially at UCSB, I think there's a lot of surveys that have way too many pre-filled out answers for you that kind of guide the question asker, the user of the survey. And I love how open-ended this was, that really let the community speak from what was top of mind and top of heart for them. And yeah, so I thought that was really great. And then my only question was to Jonathan, if I may, Ethan, I was just wondering if there was any sort of idea or something that stood out that you hadn't seen before, because you mentioned a lot of oh, we've seen this, we know this, it's good to see the community is prioritizing this, but is there anything that really stood out to you that was different or new to you?
Ooh, I mean, I think the thing that stood out, it's not new, but this is the year we had the most comments on homeless services being important. That was a big change from years before.
Got it.
That's
Thank you.
yeah. A lot, even the comments about less police, we've always had that since the first budget survey, but the homelessness issues and services, those are new, or newer in this volume.
One comment I have is that I'm excited to see how some of the answers of public awareness will change in this next year with our community engagement person to help boost awareness of the services.
Yes.
Could not agree more on that. And I'm very excited that we've got a nice little up-to-date survey about what sorts of classes and events people would be interested in, because I know that's going to be a big topic over the next year.
Yeah, once we get our community center staff one day hired, they've got their list of ideas and think they don't have to reinvent anything. So yeah, it's a good list. It actually really is a good list of ideas.
Cool. Anything else for the survey?
I had a couple thoughts on, I've been thinking about the community center and the community room. Do you guys ever think that, I mean, it seems to me with the community center that in the long term, we would want some kind of indoor stage area to be able to do, music in the community center and events. But I'm wondering what you guys would think about an outdoor stage area that would and I don't know where you'd put it in the park, but or with the building that, I was back in Ohio and stayed in a hotel and looked at an outdoor stage area in a park, and I go, oh, that is so cool that they were able to just have a permanent stage area that they could do events at. And so I don't know what we've thought about, is there an area for indoor and outdoor stage areas? And should we have more of like in our discussions with the county, a more of a master plan about what those two buildings could become? And I know we're in a current lease, but I haven't heard much strategy on our parts about, they kind of leave it to us and say, okay, you guys are going to go run a community center now, tell us what you're going to do. And I'm thinking and going, well, we're going to kind of invent that once we own the buildings and stuff and put it together. But it just seems like there's a little bit of not a very good vision about how to do community events. And I think you guys are working on that and doing regular community events and activities people can do. But it seems like we need the venues to do that. And I was thinking that, just like the community center, I go, well, a couple of bathrooms aren't adequate. And a couple of, one stage inside is probably not adequate. And how do we get there and make that transition to, I look on this thing and say the biggest thing that people put out there is we should have more concerts and events for the community. And so I don't know, I'm just trying to think about how we get from point A to point B with a great opportunity with those buildings. And how we move that forward. And then the other thing I was thinking about is lighting. I mean, lighting keeps coming up, and I don't live out there like you guys do. And I thought our walkthrough that we did was very important when we did it, and we got 31 additional public lights. But I'm trying to kind of figure out what is the real deficiency in lighting that people don't feel safe. And I think even, my kids and daughter-in-law went to UCSB and they said that because of lighting, they didn't feel safe in many areas, especially the parks and, walking through the parks at night and stuff. But I don't know if you guys have more how we approach that long term.
Can I piggyback off the first part of your question on community center funding needs? And with the caveat that, of course, we all know we're in our negotiations and we don't know where those are going to go. But there are two things that I see that are important to that vision of making it a space for performances and concerts that are unfunded as of today. And that is the acoustic improvements that need to be made to the space in order to take out the echo and the floor. And I see those two as going in hand with thinking about, is there a stage? Is it temporary? Is it permanent? Where does it go? And I'll just say again, I have not seen any indication from the county that they are going to invest money in those improvements. It seems like this last grant that they just received for the outdoor improvements is the only thing that they have left on their work plan. So I see that as something we've talked at our board before and had support there for doing stuff related to a floor. And I think when we talk about that in the future, we should also think about the acoustic and the stage element too.
Yeah, I agree that when we do open up that space or get closer to it, those are definitely at the top of my list for how we make that usable, especially given the interest in concerts and performances. And Bob, to your questions about outdoor spaces, I know the Park District is doing a lot on that front right now, including at the amphitheater in Anascoya Park, thinking about how they can revitalize that space. So I think there's some good potential for partnership by us operating the indoor space and the outdoor space at the community center, and the Park District operating their spaces in the parks.
Cool.
Anything else on the survey? All right. Well, thank you so much, Jonathan, for walking us through all of this. Do you have anything else before we adjourn?
No, not the only thing is just our schedule to keep in mind. Our next meeting, it says right here, is on, God, my computer, June 14th. And then the plan is to have the preliminary budget approved at the board meeting after that, which is June 23rd. Or I'm getting my math wrong. the second meeting in June, the fourth Tuesday in June. That's the 22nd. My bad. So we'll have the meeting on the 22nd to approve the preliminary budget. The June meeting, we will discuss mediation. We will discuss any last programs that we want to discuss. So I know the community garden, I think we've already discussed that, but I think I didn't move it. A couple other things that need to be wrapped up and discussed. And then we'll also discuss the preliminary budget as a whole in June at our finance committee meeting. So I'll have inputted as many close to final numbers as I can, and there'll be gaps where we still have gaps and estimates where we still need them. The board will approve this, hopefully, with modifications maybe on the 22nd. And then we'll have a meeting in July left to make final changes before we put forward the final budget for approval at the August meeting. And the only things that are post July 1st that our committee still needs to address and deal with will be then the community center. The Ivy Beautiful costs are the main two, because I hope to have everything else, like the policing, pricing, for example, for the safety stations, done before the end of June. So really the main two things that will change from the preliminary to the final will be how we address the community center and Ivy Beautiful. But that we're on a good schedule to have our preliminary budget approved before the end of June and have a final budget in August.
Got it. Thank you. That all sounds good. All right.
I just have one final comment on the survey. I think it's very cool that you guys collect this data and got, input from 100 people, that you can tally it up and put together a cool report that says, here's what here's some good ideas about what the community wants us to work on. And, I've been doing this a long time, but this is pretty cool for a small district to be able to get this kind of data and then actually relate it to your budget. And what are we going to do about, what the community wants? So just it's pretty cool what you guys are collecting and, you know, and then turning it into a good communication tool.
Thank you. Thank you. And our interns did an amazing job. I did nothing here. I just made the survey. Our interns did all the analysis, but do all the answers and put the report together. And they do it every year, actually. The different set of interns do this every year. So I think it's a great exercise for them in learning. So.
Well, there's a lot of smart kids that come out of UCSB. And they do great work. And it's always fun to watch the new ideas and the new concepts, and how just like the interns have great ideas to bring this stuff forward. So
right. Yeah.
I get a kick out of it.
Thank you.
Absolutely. And Mark, you have your hand up.
Sorry, I had one more thing on the survey. I'm wondering, I asked like if people had heard of SeeClickFix at the end there. I'm wondering, was there any sort of like, I don't remember, I filled out the survey, but I don't even remember myself. Was there any sort of like, at the end of the survey, like link to join SeeClickFix, or will any of these people be followed up to join SeeClickFix?
Yeah, there was a link to use SeeClickFix in the survey itself. Actually, every question in the survey had a link to the service itself. So hopefully all the people who said no will now say yes, because they've been given the information. But we will email everyone who filled out the survey. There was a question, I don't think it made it onto this, that everyone saw, but there was a question if you want to be on our email list, and most people said yes, actually. So we add them to our email list, so they'll get the regular information from us.
Yeah, I think that'd be really great, and maybe even like an intentional invite saying like you submitted your survey opinion, like you can see the survey results in our upcoming meeting on Tuesday. That's something.
Yeah, that's a great idea. That's a great idea. We haven't done that before.
I like that. Cool. All right. Well, this has been a great meeting. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Cool. Made by Brant, seconded by Geis. Jonathan, will do a roll call.
Great. Director Brant,
Yes.
Director Bertrand,
Yes.
Director Geis.
Yes.
There we go.
All right. Well, thank you all so much. I'll see you all tomorrow night.
Tomorrow at 7. See you tomorrow at 7.
Oh, that's a great reminder. So it starts at 7.
Yeah, so we can be at the fridge.
Okay. Sounds good. See you then. Thanks.
See you at the vigil.